We're in our mobile podcast studio, i.e. my car tonight. So if you hear clicking in the background, it's because I'm in a car that has issues with heating. So, also if you hear people yelling, people driving by, that's why.
They say life is what happens to you on the way that you try to get to where you're going. And in this case, life is a small desk in the basement of your old house and talking into your iPhone with terrible audio quality. It's meeting people along the way that end up becoming a large part of what it is that you're making. So we're going back to episode number 1. And then we're starting all over. See where we've come, where we went through, and maybe some episodes along the way that you didn't catch. So join me as we hear old episodes and meet old friends for the first time. In this week's Bigfoot Society Classic. Welcome back to another episode of Bigfoot Society Classic. In this episode, we are going to tear the Band-Aid off. So last time we had my first big interview with Seth from Small Town Monsters, June 3rd, 2019. Now, you might think that I got into interviews since then, right? Did not happen. I had 4, I would say, rambling episodes until I got into interviews again. So all through August and October 2019, I got into reviews for a while. We are going to rip the Band-Aid off and get through all 4 of those episodes today. And then next week, we'll be getting straight into interviews from here on out. So it's going to get pretty wild, and hope you're here for the ride. One thing before you go, if you could take a minute to like and subscribe the podcast wherever you're listening to, and share a favorite episode with a friend and on your online groups that really dig Bigfoots. Bigfoot? Oh my goodness. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get on with the show, and thanks for listening.
All right, so here is the account from Shelley in northern Georgia. I can't say for sure if our experiences in Georgia were by a Bigfoot for sure, but it could have been. We never actually saw anything, but everyone had some kind of feeling of being watched, especially when we were by the campfire out front of the cabin right next to the woods. We were staying in a cabin on Lakeseed Road in Lakemont, Georgia, summer of 2016. My in-laws rented the cabin for our family vacation. When we pulled into the parking area out front of the cabin, we all noticed a horrible, and horrible is in capitals, smell out front and to the side of the cabin by the creek. That first night, my kids, who were 14, 12, and 11, knocked on a tree by the creek inside of the house, and after the third knock of the tree, got 2 knocks back, a few minutes apart, but then nothing. My dogs, whom are not afraid of anything, were always near us and woofing on occasion, but they would not go into the woods, which is fine with me because I definitely felt goosebumps and did not want to retrieve them. They are a large breed dog, a Newfoundland Shepherd mix and a Bull Mastiff mix, medium size and not easily scared off. Anyway, that next morning around 6:30 to 7 a.m., I stepped out onto the side porch, which faces the creek, and heard a splashing in the creek, which is about 25 to 30 feet from the side of the porch. But there are a lot of bushes and trees, so I couldn't see the creek or whatever was making smacking sounds, like two rocks being smacked together. And it was walking or throwing big rocks or doing something in the water loudly. My kids were still sleeping. My father-in-law and husband were across the street lakeside fishing. So I walked over to the edge where trees and bushes were at the edge, hoping to be able to see anything, but I could hear a hugging or grunting noise. I know raccoons smack rocks, and I'm gonna say hugging is probably an auto type thing. So let's see. Loud grunting noise, okay. I know raccoons smack rocks together and bears make grunting and huffing noises, but I could only see trees and bushes. I went back inside and my husband came out and sat with me, but no more noise. And that night after we all went to sleep, something was walking around or moving something out on the deck outside our bedroom. The deck had side stairs to ground. My Newfoundland mix dog decided to leave our bedroom and wander downstairs for some reason, which he does not normally do, and our other dog was very alert and would bark occasionally. My husband and kids did go into the woods to explore, but saw or heard nothing. My kids followed the creek back up into the woods/mountainside and found some little stacks of sticks in odd places, like on top of logs, or back up under a tree that had its roots exposed from erosion, but sticks placed in a non-natural way, too perfectly positioned. My son said it looked like something a child would do or a juvenile Bigfoot. My kids loved exploring and being outside and are not jokesters, so I ruled them out, playing pranks on us. At the creek towards the back of the cabin were some chairs, and we would just sit out there while they were playing in the creek. This is another area where we all felt creepy, goosebumps almost. Funny thing is, none of us expressed these feelings to each other until months later. My mother-in-law apparently told the kids she felt like she was being watched out back there too. The odd thing was my father-in-law started sleeping in a big chair downstairs in the living room by the front door, and he was armed. None of us could figure out why, and this was on the second night. We were there about 4 to 5 days. I did manage to take a picture of what looked like a footprint in the soft grass dirt area by the creek. Like I said, I don't know what it was for sure, but I have always had a sixth sense, and I've experienced odd things in my life, and my instincts are usually not wrong. I should probably contact the owners of the cabin and ask if anything unusual has happened there, but I never have. So my family's experience probably isn't much, especially not having seen a Bigfoot. You are the first official Bigfoot website I've reported to. Thank you. Well, I would say that's a fascinating story. Very cool details in that story. And I know at the end she says it's not a big deal. I think that's a big deal. That's pretty cool how the different members of the family were having the same feelings. They only found that out until much later. The knocks back at them almost immediately is a huge deal. The dogs, how they reacted, feeling of being watched. There's a lot of evidence in there. That's a great story. So thanks again for sharing that with me. If you're listening to this podcast and you have a story you'd like to share, an encounter you had or something happened in the woods or a swamp or whatever, please feel free to send us an email to bigfootsociety@gmail.com. You can spend plenty of space in an email and you don't have any character limitations. Hello, Bigfoot Society. This is Jeremiah coming at you with another episode. We're going to talk about a few different things tonight. We're going to talk about a few podcasts I've been listening to and a few things that are coming on the horizon for Bigfoot Society. So let's get right into it. Let's talk first about the Bigfoot and Beyond podcast. If you're not listening to that podcast, there's a lot of really cool stuff that was talked about this last week. For example, could hear all about Cliff's new Bigfoot Museum near Boring, Oregon, and what they think of the other Bigfoot attraction or museum event centers around the U.S. Pretty cool chat, actually. You'll want to check that out. Also, a little tidbit they dropped is that
there are certain Bigfoot locations, sighting locations, that are actually codenamed in the Bigfoot community. For example, I think one of them was like Linda's Lake or something like that. They mentioned these places aren't even on maps, and also they've been, even if they are on maps, they've been titled something else so that, Cliff and Bobo and, the people that are in the know can mention these things in something out in the open like a podcast and not have to worry about these places being compromised. It's actually really smart. That is a pretty cool conversation. They also chatted about kind of background about all the different paranormal and Bigfoot type shows that are coming out. Mentioned a little bit about Matt Moneymaker's show that's coming out too. Bobo shared an interesting story about him and his girlfriend and how an encounter they had. Also, another podcast that had an episode come out of nowhere was the North American Wood Ape Conservancy, NAWAC. And I'll warn you, this episode is a long one, but you'll want to check it out. These guys that work down in Area X in Oklahoma, I mean, they're scientists. They know their stuff, and they go into detail about the different vocalizations that these Bigfoot and Sasquatch creatures are doing down in Oklahoma, and they're going to play examples, sound examples, break it down for you. It's a fascinating episode. I'm still working through it myself, but I'm about 3/4 of the way done. Well worth, if you do anything where you need something in the background or you're driving around. It's a 2-hour episode, but it's worth it. Also, something I wanted to mention is getting closer to the Van Meter Visitor Festival in Iowa. If you're anywhere near Iowa or central Iowa, you will not want to miss this. They've got some really, really cool people that are going to be showing up for the festival this year. I mean, it's packed. We're going to be having a showing of Seth Breedlove's new documentary, Terror in the Skies. Fantastic. Don't believe Seth will be there, but, maybe next year we'll get him. But showing the documentary, so if you haven't seen it, it's a free way to see the documentary, which you should still see. Still pay for it, still go to Amazon Prime, whatever. Also, Linda Godfrey, of course, famous for Bray Road Beast up in the North Midwest. They're going to be showing a new documentary, which sounds pretty cool. I think it's about Midwest Panthers of some sort. I'm kind of interested to see what that is. I'm really hoping she's going to be there as well. That would be cool. If not, we're going to get her next year. Every year this thing is getting crazier and crazier. Also, a documentary I've been working through right now on Amazon Prime is Finding Jay Pachochin, I believe I said the name right. He's going to be there at a table, so he's just going to be there hanging out. So if you like the documentary or the content that Jay puts out, he's going to be at the Van Meter Visitor Festival, and I'm going to be looking forward to chatting with him and meeting him. Seems like he's a really cool guy, but he's just up the road up in Wisconsin there. So it's a free one-day event based on a sighting of a flying monster that was seen in Van Meter, Iowa, just west of Des Moines. And now the town has a one-day festival about it, but every year they add more and more. There's food to eat, there's different tables to check out with local authors, Midwest authors. There's the paranormal, there's Bigfoot, there's flying cryptids, there's all sorts of crazy stuff. There's people that sneak in with Mothman shirts, but we let it fly, as it were. Nice pun there. So that's my plug for my local cryptid festival that I love going to each year. This year is going to be year number 3 going to it, and I am pumped. So I will see you there. In fact, if you're going to be at the Van Meter Visitor Festival. I want to know if you're there. Let's get into the show. I wanted to start off by doing a review of the Momo movie from Small Town Monsters. This Momo movie, you got to put on your imagination, kind of suspend disbelief, because you're getting a fiction movie at the same time you're getting a documentary movie, and it's very, very meta. There's a lot of different stuff going on here. Lyle Blackburn is a great author, great musician, plays a cryptid show host, and he's showing about the Momo monster from Louisiana, Missouri. The skits where Lyle is being the host, and then there's these almost like little vignettes. Editor's footnote: I'm recording this in my car. You just heard my car making a weird noise because it's having some weird heater issues. Anyways, yeah, so if you don't, want Bigfoot Society to have to record in his car, hit up that Amazon wish list to get us a recording studio set up. Anyways, back to the Momo review. Momo is a good story. There's a lot of really good vignettes about, okay, this is the guy who originally found it. This has happened. I don't want to give too much away. But the cool thing is if you know the inside people that are involved with Small Town Monsters, those people are actually acting in the film. And there are also some cameos that'll knock your socks off. I'll just say it. Cliff and Bobo are in it. And the stuff that Cliff and Bobo do in the posse scene is incredible. Like, it's my favorite part. Guys, you got to watch this movie. It's fantastic. On the flip side, I love it when these guys show Small Town Americana or Small Town America, maybe both. And the real trick is showing these towns, showing their folklore before these towns disappear, and the folklore disappears with it. And the shots that they've gotten in this movie, beautiful small town America, the main streets, the people that are, fighting to keep their town alive, but it's going the way of the Walmarts are coming in, the Amazon is coming in, and it's the last stand. Thankfully, some of these towns are realizing, hey, let's cash in on these legends. And that's why I think it's a cool resurgence of cryptozoology, of American folklore. It's stuff that you can't find it on the internet. Well, maybe you can a little bit, but you can't find it by going to the mall. You can't find it by going to a party. It's there, but we got to dig for it. And we were just at the Van Meter Visitor Festival, my wife and I want to say it's Michael Huntington had a really cool talk about how he researches these legends and then goes around the U.S. with his family and visit them. It's really cool. And he uses technology to do it. He's looking through these old newspaper files and he's finding these old articles, and he's going to police stations. Sometimes you just have a drawing by eyewitness of where the location is, but you got Google Maps, and you got a bird's eye view, and you can figure it out where it is. That's very cool. I just went on a super tangent there, but that's okay. So sometimes it's okay to turn off the TV, put down the iPhone, and go out and explore. With your kids, your spouse, your significant other, whatever. You go by yourself, that's fine. The Momo monster movie, I know I'm not saying the actual title, so forgive me, but the Momo monster movie by Seth Breedlove, Small Town Monsters, is legit. I wasn't sure if I was going to be a super fan, to be honest, and I backed the Kickstarter. but I watched it the other night, and it's great. We're going to share a newer sighting report from the BFRO. This report is ATV rider recalls passing very close to a Bigfoot at dusk in 8 Mile Canyon near Lidor in Idaho. This happened in the year 2007 during the summer month of July near Road US 28. In July of 2007, a friend and I went camping and fishing to the Birch Creek area off of Highway 28 in Clark County. We crossed the creek and set up camp at the trailhead in 8 Mile Canyon. There's an ATV trail system that loops up the canyon and around the mountain range. One evening, we decided to go up to the canyon to the southwest and explore a bit before dark. We found a lightly used trail that went into a dark canyon. We suspected it went to a dead end, but we went up the trail to look around. The trail went through a dark canyon that seemed to have thicker vegetation than the main 8 Mile Canyon. I remember noticing that there was a lot of deadfall. We got to the end of the canyon trail that was about 2 miles in and came to a very scenic view of towering shell rock cliffs and bowls. We realized that it was slowly starting to get darker, so we decided to head back to camp. As we rode down the trail, I stayed about 50 yards behind my friends. It was getting dark enough that the headlights on our ATVs were illuminating the trail and passing trees, but still enough light in the sky so you could look around and see hillsides and clearings. Being a hunter, I was looking for big game as I traveled. At one spot, the trail started to angle to the right. As my friend made the curve, I remember observing what I thought was a weird stump or log off the trail to the left. It seemed about 4 feet tall, and I thought I don't remember seeing it there on our way in a couple of hours ago. Just after he went by it, though, it stood up. The thing was facing away from me and looking toward my friend as he drove away. I was too close to do anything other than stay my course and go by. As I started going by, I leaned away from it to my right. It looked over toward me over its right shoulder. It then appeared to straighten out its right arm toward me. I ducked my head and accelerated up the trail. I don't feel that it was trying to harm me, even though I was extremely frightened at the time. I estimated the being to be about 8 feet tall, judging from the height and judging from my height on the ATV at the time in relation to its arm height. It had no clothing. It was covered in dark hair from the top of its head down. I noticed it had dark skin on its face and yellowish eyes. The right hand was similar to a human's with fingers and a thumb, all dark in color. I remember smelling an odor similar to an elk in the rut, but with a stronger scent. 2 years later, several of us decided to go back to the canyon and ride the main trail system. As we went by the old trailhead, we noticed that the Forest Service had boarded off the trail with an elaborate wall of fencing stating trail was closed to traffic. So that's a pretty cool story. There's a lot going on there. You may have seen, this reminds me of a few videos I've seen on YouTube where it's like, a guy on the trail and you see something that moves away, but not out of the main focus of the film. You got to watch it a few times to kind of see it there. That's pretty cool. I probably would have kept riding pretty quick away if it started to reach its arm and hand towards me as well. That is a very interesting detail how they tried to go back a few years later and the trail was closed off to traffic. You never know why stuff like that happened. Maybe there was something found. Maybe there's a nest found, like the Olympic. I believe it's the Olympic Project guys have found. I heard about that on a podcast where, they found a few kind of nest-like structures out in the woods of Washington State, I want to think it is. But, in the next few episodes, we may share a few more sighting reports, but we would love to share your sighting report. If you want to send your report
to bigfootsociety@gmail.com, or you can go to @BigfootSociety on Instagram and just send us a message, DM there. We get reports either way. We'll always ask if we can share it, but we have gotten sighting reports in the past where we're the first person that the reportee has talked to, which is really cool. That's an honor. So, we are here to respect what you've experienced. And if you have any evidence or photos or videos, or you just want to type out your story sighting, please feel free to send that over. We will respect you and your sighting with the greatest care. Again, check out the Momo Monster movie by Seth Breedlove and Small Town Monsters. And we're going to try to get another interview going here for the podcast. Who knows who's next? Get ready. I may be approaching you. You have no idea if it's coming or not, but going to try to get a new one, a good one, and see if we can get one just as good as the Seth Breedlove interview. That's our top one so far. But again, thank you for taking the time out of your day, your night, to listen to our podcast. Hi, this is Jeremiah from Bigfoot Society coming at you with the next episode of the Bigfoot Society podcast. We're in our mobile podcast studio, i.e. my car tonight. So if you hear clicking in the background, it's because I'm in a car that has issues with heating. So, also if you hear people yelling, people driving by, that's why. Anyways, let's get on to the show. Tonight we're going to talk about primarily how I met Jay Pachochin, and then what I thought of his documentary, Finding Jay, after that. At the Van Meter Visitor Festival, which I know is not a Bigfoot thing, but in Iowa we have a flying cryptid that was seen in the late 1800s. You can see in earlier episodes I talk about that. But this year is actually a gentleman that came down from Wisconsin. His name is Jay Pachochin, and he has put together a documentary called Finding Jay. So I was able to talk to Jay there. Me and my buddy Andrew were hanging out there with our significant others. Jay is just a very down-to-earth, genuine guy. Sorry, there's a cop that just went by very slowly by my parked car, so I just got a little nervous there. But he seems to have kept driving on. Right now we're in the East Village of Des Moines. Anyways, Jay Pachochin, very genuine individual, took his time out to talk to us about the findings that he has seen in the Kettle Moraine section of Wisconsin, which, if you may know about it, you may not. It's a vast wooded area with these large, deep indentations that are caused by the glaciers moving through Wisconsin back in the day. Way back in the day. So anyways, you're hiking through those, and you've got these deep wooded glacier indentations that are now full of woods and stuff, and great area for Bigfoot to hide in, among other things. So now there's many different ways to watch Jay's documentary, Finding Jay. You can buy a copy from him directly, which I would recommend. Support the artist. There's other ways to support the artist as well. You can find his documentary on things like, I know it's on Amazon Prime Video. And so I spent some time watching his documentary, and it starts out with great overview of different Bigfoot, Sasquatch video clips from around the internet. very interesting. And then Jay gets really into it, kind of talking about his family history and, how he got into the whole Bigfoot thing, how he used to be more into paranormal investigations, and then he got into Bigfoot. It's very interesting. I definitely recommend looking into, watching it for yourself. But the further you get into this documentary, Jay gets into it's field reports with different people that he's brought out, everyone from his kids, his friends, his coworkers, and there's stuff that is gone over in this documentary that blow your mind. I mean, for one, really good graphics in it. I believe Jay has a graphics background. There's some phenomenal drone footage as well, like the drone footage that you see of Wisconsin in the woods will blow your mind how beautiful it is. I definitely want to go up there and see it now. But man, there's some weird stuff that happens up in those woods. There's some things that they see heat signatures of, and it will just, blow your mind. I don't want to spoil the one part, but I also want to do a review of the documentary. So I'm just going to start talking about it and, see what happens. Either way, you need to go watch it. There's this one part where him and some people are out in Kettle Moraine, and they straight up see some red eyes. And they see another pair of red eyes. I'm just skimming the surface about the stuff Jay throws at you. The other cool thing is that Jay has a very active YouTube channel, and I'm just starting to look through all the footage or the things on that as well. And there's one I'm watching right now, and it literally picks up right after the documentary ends. They go back to the same place. It's super cool. Man, it's a really good documentary, guys. Like, y'all be honest, like, you look at the title and you're like, okay, what is this guy doing? He's trying to rip off the Finding Bigfoot thing. But then you watch it and you're like, okay, I get what he means. I get what he means. I mean, in my opinion, it's a definite, must watch, must check it out, support the artist, all that good stuff. You may know that I also like to listen to a few podcasts myself, so I'm just going to spend a few minutes kind of going over stuff that have gleaned from the Bigfoot and Beyond podcast. I don't know him. I would love to interview him. Cliff and Bobo are amazing. I feel like I know him just from listening to their podcast. Hilarious. Cool thing number one. In Cliff's Bigfoot Museum, if you want to get married, Cliff can marry you at the Bigfoot Museum in Boring, Oregon. That's legit. He says on the podcast he'll marry you in front of their Bigfoot. The other thing I just remembered is just a few days ago, of course, St. Paddy's Day. Now, not the St. Patrick's Day, of course, because you look at the calendar, it's not anywhere near that. But we're talking about the day of the recording of the Patterson-Gimlin film. We all know what that is. You've all seen the footage with Patty walking across the creek bed in the Bluff Creek area, doing a little look back around the shoulder. Look back over the shoulder, I should say. But think about that. Think about that whole history for a few minutes. from what I know so far, there's a lot of ridicule over the last few years over the whole thing. And just in the last few years, I feel like Mr. Gilman is starting to get the respect in the community and starting to get around to different conferences, and people are definitely starting to respect him. And that's awesome. But, I mean, you just imagine, like, these guys are like, what if you had gotten the footage and you'd been scared to share it? You know, let's just get rid of this. People are going to think we're crazy, right? They just go along their whole lives and it just kind of blows my mind that these guys, they have the guts to do something that most people wouldn't have done, and that's kind of, share the footage, share the evidence. Here in Bigfoot Society, we want to share the evidence, also share the stories, but more importantly, share the evidence. A paraphrase of what, Cliff has been saying recently over and over again is, it's not just stories, it's also evidence. It's hard when you have a podcast to share, we usually share more of the stories, but it's hard to share evidence over a podcast form. I'm sure if I think about it for a while, I kind of figure that out. But what we want to do is we want to be the way that you share your Bigfoot or Sasquatch story to the rest of the world. There's multiple ways that you can do that. If you have Instagram, you can go over to @Bigfoot Society and you can, send me a direct message and say, hey, I've got a story to share, and we'll go back and forth, and I'll ask if I can share your story. I won't use your real name, unless you want me to, but most people don't, for some sort of security. People out there want to hear encounter stories. So if you got some, also you can send me an email at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. That also leads into, we are starting to put the podcast episodes up to YouTube as well. So do us a favor, go over to YouTube if that's what you prefer, and subscribe to us over at YouTube. It's under Bigfoot Society. Like, subscribe. As always, stay tuned. Follow Instagram. Comment on our posts there. And we'll see you next time on the Bigfoot Society podcast.
Here at Bigfoot Society, our goal is to provide a platform for those that have encountered Bigfoot to share their encounter in a safe and respected environment. But we need to hear your story. If you've experienced something that you just can't explain, please send me an email at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Then we can start the conversation. And I know a lot of you have not shared your encounter at all. It's been 20 years, and it's time that you get this off your chest, and then you can get some well-deserved rest, because I know you haven't been sleeping. I understand what you're going through, and I appreciate every one of you listening.